Welcome to MedHeads, the weekly show that brings a biopsychosocial focus to issues of the day, along with special guests who will showcase their expertise and enthusiasm about their field of practice. Your host, Dr. Fergal Armstrong.
Hello everyone, my name is Dr. Fergal Armstrong and welcome to MedHeads. Today we have Oscar Grano and Craig Payne. Oscar and Craig, how are you both?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Fergal.
Oscar,
yeah, very well. How you going?
Good. It's good to see you both. So I thought today we would talk about continual growth as it applies to recovery. And I suppose really in my mind, the first thing that is required for continual growth is the acceptance of the status quo. What would you say to that, Craig?
Look, acceptance plays a big part in it, and life's always throwing up new challenges and new changes, and so it's how we adapt to that and what happens with that. So, the second that you accept what's happening is when you can start to find the solutions and put things in place to keep moving forwards.
So, if you don't accept that you're in difficulties, that you've got a problem, you can't grow, you can't change.
Yeah, well, you got to have a look at your situation and just see what's going on and work out, are there any underlying factors for irritability or dissatisfaction or whatever's happening for you at the moment. But just accepting that something's happening is where you start to move forwards. So
you're looking at the man in the mirror and you have to accept what that man looks like. Oscar, what does that say to you? How does that relate to your experience as a peer support worker with lived experience?
I think that acceptance is also essentially the gateway to recovery. That's kind of the first stop, is the admission and the acceptance of the problem itself. And then from there, ongoing recovery is very much about accepting things the way that they are. And
so it's the prerequisite to
trying
recovery.
To gain a clear Yeah, absolutely. And also trying to maintain a clear perspective on what you can and can't control. And accepting that, doing what you can do, and then letting the rest go.
Yeah. Can you relate that, or can you tell us an example in your own life, Oscar, of how you didn't accept and what happened, and then how you did accept and then what happened? So first of all, tell us a story about how you didn't accept your current situation.
Well, I suppose if I, relate it back to addiction, there was multiple times before this time where I attempted to get into recovery, and I never accepted how insurmountable what I was facing really was if I attempted to face it on my own, and if I attempted to do it without complete abstinence. So it was while I was trying to still control things and approach using in this way and with these people and only at these times. It wasn't until I kept ending up in the same place over and over and over again, no matter how I attempted to approach substance use. And then when I accepted that the evidence was irrefutable, that for me the only option was complete abstinence, that was when my recovery really started. And it was only from that moment that I was actually able to achieve any growth at all.
Craig, how do you feel listening to what Oscar says, and how does that relate to your experience helping others?
Yeah, absolutely. It's spot on. I think for most people, the part of the journey is the acceptance, and it's the difference between the acknowledgement and the acceptance that, you might know that there's a problem for a long time, but until you actually accept it, you can't be working at the right solution. And as Oscar touched on, he kept falling back into the control side of things, because there's that thing of, all right, I've got this, I'll be able to do it differently, but without fully accepting the circumstances. And it's only once that's made, boom, he starts working on the right solution.
Craig, we're talking about continual growth today, and we've just described the initial acceptance of the problem, but how does acceptance determine our growth in recovery?
Well, it constantly comes up. in recovery, because life's always throwing up different events, life's always throwing up different times, and as we, Oscar touched on it, that there's that complacency that comes back into things, and so you've got to be continually growing. You've got to be looking at new solutions. You've got to be looking at new challenges for yourself, because you risk boredom kicking in, you risk complacency kicking in, and if you're not challenging yourself, then you're not growing.
So in that regard, you have to accept the fact that you need to go on to new challenges. Is that right? Because you could, if we say that acceptance is key to recovery, you could accept the fact that you're not challenging yourself very easily. I don't want to get up out of bed on a Sunday morning,
Yeah, but that's probably likely to, if that then continues and you're not getting out of bed on Sunday morning, Monday morning, Tuesday morning, you've got to start looking at what the reasons are behind that. And
right.
Hey, maybe you just want to sleep in on Sunday, and that's cool. But if there's actually something else going on underlying that, you've got to be challenging yourself to have a good hard look and find out what that is, so you can grow from it.
Right. So, Oscar, how does acceptance figure in your continual growth?
Well, on an ongoing basis, it's extremely important on a day-to-day basis. That I attempt to align my perspective with accepting things the way that they are. And
tell me more
whenever
about
I'm faced
what
with,
do you accept?
Well, for a long time, I accepted the fact that, that I was a full-time single father, which happened really unexpectedly at the drop of a hat, and that was a very big ongoing journey in constantly reaffirming my acceptance around the difficulties of that situation. And that's just one example,
right.
But the really important thing within that is maintaining acceptance, maintaining the perspective on what I can and can't control. And, once I reach that perspective, am I able to let the rest go? And by holding on to what I can't control, all that's happening, the only person suffering from that is me, essentially.
So that reminds me of the Serenity Prayer, doesn't it? Having the knowledge to understand what you can and cannot control, and then accepting that which you cannot control. Is that what you're alluding to?
Yeah, well, it's definitely spot on with that.
Yeah. So Craig, then, acceptance is the key to identifying or dealing with the stuff that you cannot control, and then working on the stuff that you can control. And this is where you've talked before there about the challenges, and that's the second thing I want to talk about, is the fact is you do have to challenge yourself during recovery. Tell us more, Craig, about challenging yourself in recovery.
Well, it's challenging yourself in life. It's not just recovery. It's, once you're in recovery, you start to live life, and then life's full of challenges. And how I react to them, how I adapt to them. And Oscar keeps touching on it perfectly with the word control. You keep falling back into this belief that you can control things in life, and that no matter how well we plan, how well we do things are going to work out. And it just happens. And so it's acknowledging that things aren't going to work out, and that finding different solutions to the different problems that pop up for you. And by doing that, you got to set new recovery goals. Early days, it starts at a day, 2 days, like it's just a day at a time. Then you get 30, then you get 60, then you get 90, and just the more you sort of build up, the longer you go, I suppose, the different challenges build up. And it's recognizing what they are for you, and moving forwards with it.
So do you think that actually deliberately challenging yourself is a key to continual growth?
Absolutely. And it's got to be realistic though too. If you're...
Tell us more about that.
Well, if you're putting too big a expectation and too big a goal on yourself, then you're sort of setting yourself up for failure, and always to not reach it. And that can have repercussions, because that then leads to a lower self-esteem or that feeling of failure. And, so keeping those goals realistic.
If you don't challenge yourself, is that okay?
Well, I think you risk running into the boredom and complacency side of
Right.
things.
So,
We've got to
so
be moving forwards.
challenging yourself is a key part of continual growth insofar as it avoids the boredom. It avoids
Yeah,
you
absolutely.
having the space to slip back. Oscar, does that ring true with you?
100%. And,
Tell us more about that.
I really think that just to begin with, it's like if you're in a place where, you're in a detox or you're in a place where you're needing to look at recovery, chances are things aren't working out too well for you. And your decision making hasn't, it's not working. You're in a place, where you're defeated. So, you know, uh, to me, it seems really obvious. You need to challenge yourself. And for me, like in the beginning, I basically had to learn that I just have to do the opposite of what I think is a good idea. And and I essentially did that for quite some time until my thinking actually started to change and the rewiring of the brain started to happen. And then I became capable of making positive, non-self-destructive decisions kind of on my own basis. But in the very beginning, everything I did, every single action every day was challenging and going directly against what I thought I should be doing.
And who was driving you in terms of those challenges? Why were you challenged? Was someone else telling you something different?
Yeah, well, I was guided in the peer support communities that I was a
Right.
part of. Yeah.
So you were being challenged by your peer support friends and colleagues, yeah?
Yeah, in the recovery community that I
Yeah,
was a
in the
part of.
recovery community. So you were
Yeah,
being
I
challenged.
was totally just taking
Right.
guidance.
And that challenge was an essential part of your continued growth. Is that right?
Absolutely, absolutely. Because a really essential skill that I learnt in those early days, which still serves me well today, is the ability to put my action in a certain place, regardless of what I'm thinking or feeling.
Tell me more about
And
that. What does that
that's
mean?
really, so that means that, um, you know, say, like Craig was talking about not wanting to get out of bed in the morning or not wanting to have a difficult conversation with somebody or wanting to go and eat badly when I'm trying to stick to a certain, exercise and eating routine, like whatever it is, it's about learning how to line my behavior up with my values today, even if the way I'm feeling or what I'm thinking is driving me away from that.
Yes,
If that makes
yes.
sense.
Now, Oscar, you
Yeah.
used the word change in there, and this is a really useful segue into change as part of continual growth, because I suppose change defines growth, doesn't it, Craig?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, if you're, yeah, simple as is yes.
Yeah. So now, I mean, change, it covers a myriad of possibilities, but let's break down change into attitudes, behavior, and spirituality. Tell us about change in attitude, change in behavior, change in spirituality as it applies to the continual growth of someone in recovery. Craig.
Well, I think it comes down to a change in beliefs and a challenging of those beliefs. The
Right.
story that you've told yourself for so long, the story you've come to believe about yourself. Oscar touched on a couple of little things there, and people use for different reasons. And maybe it's around anxiety, maybe it's around difficult conversations, confrontation, avoidance, and so it's learning to cope with those situations and learning the methods and the tools to do so. And that takes a change in self. That takes a change in outlook and a change in your belief of what you can and can't do with and without substances.
Can you give us a specific example of that, Craig?
I think about looking at on the anxiety side of things. Oh, well, actually, let's look at difficult conversations and the confrontation side of things, where I know in the past I used to avoid that a lot and dance around that, but nothing ever changed and nothing ever got solved. So I had to learn better communication methods, gain a better understanding of myself, and through those communication methods, and then have a good network set up for me around after those conversations have happened. But it's only through having that difficult conversation and challenging myself to do it that I was able to move forwards from it and reach a solution.
And what was that difficult conversation? What was it about?
Well, there's been plenty of them. But even just say a conversation with a work manager about standing up for myself, and having a different point of view to how something should be done.
Yeah.
Instead of just being subservient to that and just going along with it at the time, I'm now able to put my point of view across, but also accept that it's not always going to go my way. And that's okay. But it's just the fact that I've been able to set my boundaries, been able to put my point of view across, that I then feel a lot more confident in myself, and I can take that into the next situation, into the next confrontation, into the next challenge, just building it up as we go.
So those were skills that you had to learn as part of your change, is that right, Craig? And you didn't have those skills before.
No, I was very black or white. There wasn't a whole lot of middle ground with things.
Right. So Oscar, what do you think about change as a function of continual growth?
Well, if you're growing, then you're changing. That's I believe that's inevitable. And I think that you touched on the word spirituality in behavioral change. And I really believe that basic application of spiritual principles is essential to learn how to have ongoing behavioral change, really lasting behavioral change that will set your life in a way up where you're not going to go back to using necessarily.
So what can you talk a little bit more about the spiritual aspect of change and behavior change? Tell us more.
Yeah, sure. So just to, a really simple example of some, spiritual principles that I believe are essential to get any kind of recovery. And it's kind of the first three that a lot of people are taught how to behave in, and that's honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness, and it's the honest admission that, yes, I have a problem. And then the open-mindedness of, maybe there is another way and maybe there is something that can help me. And then the willingness of, okay, I've found something that can help me, and I'm going to let it help me, and I'm going to do whatever it takes.
So I'm not really hearing much spirituality there. That to me is just common sense. I'm playing devil's advocate here, mine. So Craig, talk us through the spirituality of that.
Well, there is spirituality in it because it's looking at things from a different angle. It's challenging self to believe in a different way of doing things.
Right.
And I know going down that path, it's accepting that maybe living towards more spiritual principles.
What are those spiritual principles?
Is a better way to be. Well, you touch on it. It seems like common sense, but it's it's a lot around accepting that you don't have a control over the day. That there's a bigger belief and a bigger purpose out there. That you can only just get through each day as you can, and trying to live it, behaving in a positive way where you don't make things more difficult. Where you and just. Yeah.
So is this where the acknowledgement of a higher being comes into it? Because in certain types of recovery, that recovery is predicated on the acknowledgement of a higher being. With other types of recovery, there is no acknowledgement of a higher being. Are we alluding to that? Is that what we're talking about here, Craig?
Yeah. Well, acceptance of that higher power has played a big part. Yeah, acceptance of or belief in a higher power has come about things because, and again, it's about that thing of for so long, recovery is tried alone for a lot of people, but then it's only by accepting that there's a bigger purpose and a higher power to all this that can help. And if you hand over and you stop trying to control things and just let things unfold, life will be okay.
Oscar, what do you think about the belief in a higher power?
Yeah, well, in the beginning, it was something that I really struggled with, but then somebody broke it down for me in a really simple way. And what I learned was that I can make anything a higher power as long as it's not me and it's loving and caring. And those are the only two criteria that it has to have.
Yeah.
And in the beginning, I just went, well, the group, the meetings that I'm attending, I'm going to make the meeting my higher power because it's bigger and more powerful than me and it helps me. And that's as simple as it needs to be. And I really believe that when talking about spirituality and the higher power and all this stuff, it can very easily be misconstrued, and that recovery is just about practical application of spiritual principles.
So this is the point I'm trying to get at. Sorry, Craig, I interrupted you. Go on.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, and that's starting to touch on it. Those spiritual principles and things we start to look at for so long. Addiction's such a selfish disease, and it becomes all about selfish, self, me, the way I look at things, what I want all the time. But it's only when you can start to switch that thinking and the attitude and everything else around to a more selfless lifestyle that you start to see real positive change in your life and within yourself, and just feel better in general.
So an acknowledgement of a higher power is key to continual growth. I think we would all agree on that. Now, the point I want to make now is that a lot of people think that the acknowledgement of a higher power is tantamount to saying that recovery is predicated on Christianity or a belief in the Christian God, and that when you go to recovery meetings, you have to profess a faith in a Judeo-Christian God. And that can put some people off. Now, I can see you both laughing at this, so let's set this matter once and for all to bed. Oscar, tell us why it's not true for you, and then Craig. Oscar first.
I've never believed in God, and I never will. And yeah, like I said, when I first went to meetings and stuff, that was one thing that I really struggled with, and I was lucky enough to hang around long enough to have somebody explain to me what it really means. And I think the way that it's written, like you said, the way that it's written, and like I said before, it can be really easily misconstrued, but there is nothing religious about it in it.
Yeah. And Craig?
Yeah. So, I mean, whilst it's described as God, but we've touched on it earlier as a higher power. And that's where I sit comfortable with it, because people hear God and you're right, it's instant to go down the Bible story and that Christian story, but it's just so far from the truth, and it's just coming back to a belief that there is a bigger purpose and a power greater than you that can get you through. Yeah. And to touch on Oscar's point, I actually heard of a girl who was really struggling with the concept of higher power and what that meant. And at the end of her bed was a bottle of HP sauce. And because it had it was HP, she took it as higher power. And you can believe in it if it's anything. And and if initially that's what started her on that process to then believing in a bigger, higher power. And I know people's concept of higher power changes over time. Mine has. It's been many different things over the course of time. But yeah, it's just believing that there's something bigger out there. And don't see that word God and run away, because you're taking away a great chance. You're losing a great opportunity to have a good crack at some good recovery.
Yeah.
And it's not a cult.
It's not a cult. I think that's really important to get over, isn't it? It's not a cult. Recovery peer support networks are not cults. And I actually have thought about this a lot, because I have been challenged myself by people asking, AA is just a cult or NA is just a cult. And for me, the key defining difference between any cult and AA, NA, or these recovery models, well, there's two. The first difference is that cults are focused on one head guy at the top of the pyramid. And the second difference is that cult members are never free to go. But with AA, there are lots and lots of individual separate groups all working on the same principles, but they're all facilitated. They're not led, but they're facilitated by many different people. and you're free to go. You're free to go to, and pick and choose. You can go wherever you like. Is that something that you would agree with, Oscar? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. There's no hierarchy in any of those
Exactly.
meetings at
There's
all,
no hierarchy.
and you participate and attend entirely on your own terms.
Yeah, and you can go if you want to. You don't have to come back.
Yeah,
Yeah, and
yeah,
Craig, would you
absolutely.
agree? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a program that's based on spiritual principles.
Yeah,
And yeah, you're right. I was thinking about this the other day. You come and go, and the only thing that people will say to you when you go to a meeting is, "Hey, keep coming back." When
yeah,
you step foot out that door, there's no expectation of you to be doing anything other than keep coming to meetings, and then you can start to incorporate a bit more into life from there. But yeah, there's no expectation on anything else.
yeah, yeah. So danger signs. That was one of the things that we agreed we'd talk about today in the context of continued growth. Tell us about what does that mean, Craig? What do danger signs mean in continual growth, and what are they, and how are they managed, and how are they recognized?
So this one's big for me, and I think just as an example, I was somewhere around 4 years recovery. No, actually 3.5 years recovery, and all of a sudden, a lot of thoughts were coming back in. And I was frustrated, I was short fused, I was bored. There was a fair bit going on. I just felt like every day was Groundhog Day, and I was getting really complacent. And yeah, there was a lot of those thoughts coming back in again as to using or acting out one of my addictions. And I was able to sit down with a friend and just talk to them about it and see what was going on. And we identified that I'd got into recovery, studied, got a job, and then got another job that I wanted as well. And life was just spinning a little bit. There wasn't much going on. And so it was all those external things, the boredom, the frustration, and yeah, as I say, those thoughts, there was, as they say, the restless irritability and discontent that was starting to fall into things. And so I was looking for a solution outside myself to give me some sort of satisfaction.
Yeah. Oscar, does that resonate with you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Tell me about your danger signs.
Well, I haven't had any actual obsession or compulsion to use any substances. The last time was when I was about 9 months clean. But in terms of living with the thinking of addiction, which is something that's always there to some degree, it's really become about learning, over the years in recovery and learning about what's important to me, and through a lot of trial and error and a lot of mistakes and a lot of different kinds of relationships in different contexts, I've learnt what my values are and the kind of person I want to be and the way that I want to behave in the world in those relationships. And then it's about looking at today, does my behavior line up with those values? And if my behavior doesn't line up with those values, then that's when an alarm bell is ringing. That's when I'm beginning to act out in some way that, like Craig said, I'm beginning to do something which is attempting to use something outside of myself to change the way that I feel.
Craig and Oscar, thank you so much for your pearls of wisdom as usual. Unfortunately, we are running out of time. But for both of you, I'm going to ask you the same question. I need you to give me one message of hope on the subject of continued growth for anyone watching. So, Craig first, a message of hope on continued growth.
Yeah, I guess you never know what you're capable of. And if you're not challenging yourself, you're not pushing yourself to find out exactly what you can do. And you're capable of so much more than is happening at the moment.
And Oscar, one message of hope on continued growth.
Keep it really simple and don't forget to acknowledge the small wins. If your head hits the pillow and you haven't picked up at the end of the day, in the early days, then it's been a successful day no matter what else happens.
Craig and Oscar, thank you so much for your pearls of wisdom. Look forward to chatting with you both again very soon. Thank you.
Thanks, boys.
That's it for today's MedHeads. My name is Dr. Fergal Armstrong. See you next time.